Greetings from Paranormal M, your portal to the uncharted. Delve into the unknown with us by subscribing and turning on notifications. Stay tuned for our latest spellbinding stories that'll challenge your perceptions. Enjoy the journey. Ask Reddit. I used to collect pocket watches. Many years ago, I bought a cheap but interesting one at a junk shop in Chinatown. It was of the variety that needed to be manually wound, which I consider to be an appealing trait. Upon purchasing the watch, I wound it up, and for the next day or so, I had a streak of monumentally good luck. Everything went my way. A girl that I liked agreed to go on a date with me, a webcomic that I was running got 15,000 unique views, and the lottery ticket that I bought, purely on a whim, resulted in me getting something like $150. Clearly, it was the watch. I was tempted to keep using it, of course, but I don't want to wear out whatever charm that it had. As such, I stopped winding it, and resolved to only take it out when I needed a little bit of random fortune. That was when everything went downhill. As soon as the watch stopped, my luck reversed entirely. I wound up in the emergency room on the day of my date. The webcomic's artist quit. My car's back tire blew out on the highway, and the damage cost well over $150 to repair. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong, as though the debt of good luck that I'd incurred was being repaid with an incredibly steep amount of interest. Once again, I was sure that the watch was to blame. Needless to say, the implications were astounding. If I was willing to steel myself against a potential calamity, I could be assured of having exceptionally good luck whenever I wanted. Might even be able to use the bad luck to my advantage. Unfortunately, things didn't work out that way in the slightest. Regardless of what I prepared myself to endure, the consequences of using the watch were always, without fail, of a nature that both completely undermined its own benevolence and left me off worse than before. Once, while hoping to hear back about a job to which I applied, I wound the watch. Within hours, I received a call from an enthusiastic hiring manager who immediately set me up with an interview. When the day of the interview came, which was not long after I'd stopped winding the watch, the bus I was riding broke down. I had to take a very expensive taxi ride to my destination, and upon arrival I was told that the position had been filled. Since then, I've tried winding the wretched thing a handful of other times. I've always regretted it. The price in bad luck is never worth the brief increase in good fortune. Someone once recommended that I simply keep the watch wound indefinitely. But what happens if I forget one day? I shudder to think about what could occur if I went a week, a month, or even longer with nothing but good luck, only to have the watch's hands grind to a halt. Perhaps my heart would stop with them. I'm not a superstitious man by nature. I can think of several rational explanations for why my luck appears to change when I use that watch. But that hasn't stopped me from wrapping it up in a paper towel and hiding it in the deepest recesses of my closet. My friend's mom had some spooky experiences in a house that they used to live in. One day she was laying in bed after her husband left for work. She didn't work at the time, so she slept a little later than he did before getting up to do stuff. She heard someone walking around the house and figured maybe he hadn't just left yet. A few minutes later, she felt the sheets behind her rise, as if someone was getting into bed with her. No one was there. She felt breath on her neck as whatever it was laid down next to her. She bolted out of the house and waited for her husband to come home before returning to the house. Months go by. She starts working. One day, she comes home from work and found her hubby on the ground in the backyard. He told her he fell, but it turned out to be a brain aneurysm. Passed away not long after that. She was heartbroken. A couple of weeks later, she got back to work after grieving the loss of the love of her life. She was talking to her coworker and standing next to her printer with her computer in full view. Only her computer could print from that printer. The printer started printing something out. All the paper said was SSDD. Her husband had used to always say, "Same shit, different day." Guess he wanted to let her know that he was okay and still there for her. She hasn't dated since he passed away and raised their child, my best friend, who was a wee baby at the time, on her own. Ask Reddit. Years ago, I almost froze to death in a cabin. I was deep in the mountains, a little hut that was set up for long hikes like mine. At some point in the night, the wind threw open the door, and all the heat I had made with the furnace was now gone. I woke up so cold, I thought I couldn't move. I had a strangely calm feeling, and I was pretty sure I would just freeze to death. I even had some weird, vivid vision of the next hikers walking in to find my blue corpse. After what felt like an hour of going in and out of consciousness, I started feeling really warm, and the night suddenly became as illuminated as day. The door, flapping in the wind, gave me a short glimpse of this tall, slender, glowing figure with long hair standing in the snow. I had an undying urge to get up and talk to them, so I got out of my sleeping bag and without throwing in my external layers, I walked out into the blizzard, looked up at this glowing woman. She was taller than anyone could be, and she just looked down at me, smiling. I walked around the woods with her for a while, then made it back to the cabin and fell asleep. I think it was all a dream or hallucination. But in the morning, the furnace was burning wood. Wood had been chopped in front of the cabin, and a fire had been started. Haunted for 2 years in a house. I'm just trying to get input from others. I've had a lot of experiences off and on in my life, but my experiences weren't things that built up and became more, malicious. They relatively stayed consistent in how they showed themselves. I rented an apartment upstairs in an old house. I noticed that the closet in my room constantly reeked of curry. It never went away, and it was noticeable even before I moved in. My kids were too scared to sleep in their room because of the closet, a different closet, in their room, which was a long, narrow closet that went into the living room and opened up on the other side. There was an instance that I was playing hide and seek with the kids. The game goes on for like 10 minutes. I think I hear one of my kids hiding by their room, like I hear movement. I jump out and I say, "Boo!" and all the kids' toys in their room light up and make sounds. Scared me more too because my kid wasn't over there at all. Nobody was. Another time I was in my bedroom with the door cracked. There's a linoleum floor, a little hallway in the front of it, and it's also next to the kids' room. I'm hearing walking on it. It sounds like pacing back and forth. The way it sounded was like those old penny loafer business shoes. Finally, I go out and open the door thinking it was my partner. It wasn't them. There was nobody there. I had a shelf above my kitchen stove to hold my spices and stuff, just small things. You could see the kitchen from the living room. It was a small place. Instead of stuff falling down like it usually does with gravity, it projected straight across, violently. It would fly straight across horizontally and hit the wall across from it. It happened so frequently that even guests started seeing it happen. I was in my bedroom. My partner was asking me about having intimacy in the dark. I declined. Nothing to that, I thought. Fast forward, and during a tornado, siren going off. were all in that long closet I mentioned before, the one that connects to the living room and the kids' room. My partner was behind the door facing the living room, and I was on the side facing the kids' room. When the tornado stuff went away and the siren stopped, he asked me, "Did you write this?" I asked what he meant. He didn't want to tell me because he said it would be inappropriate and the kids were there. So he shows me, what had been behind the door, which I probably never saw because I used that closet for storage. Had huge items, boxes, furniture in there. Nobody could fit in or walk in there without taking everything out. Nobody went in there. It said, "Do you want to have sex in the dark?" But the letters were all askew, and they trailed downward toward the floor. At the time, my kids were too young to be able to write this as well, so... Not that they would anyway, they don't talk like that. After that, I was absolutely terrified. My kids slept with me in my bed after that. We could hear something moving underneath it, and we could feel it moving. It was weird to me because there were boxes and stuff under there, but I figured it could be a cat and tried to reassure the kids. The bedroom door had been closed, mind you, so any pets that would run out of there I'd know. So I turn on the light, look and move everything. There's nothing there. I lied to my kids that it was a cat. Can't sleep. I feel like something's watching me from the bedroom closet. A message from the other side. This is a true story that spans 30 years. Back in the early 90s, I was just starting high school. At the time, I had a long-term girlfriend named Kara, but she attended a different high school in a different city, about 20 miles north of where I lived. Kara and I had our typical evening routine. We would talk on the phone for about an hour, talking about our day, making plans, or talking about the latest episode of Beverly Hills 90210. Typical high school shit. We were two typical teens that were in love, talking about our future plans as if we were going to be together forever. Sometimes we would discuss her drill team schedule and the upcoming competitions that I would attend with her. Kara was on the drill team for her school, and they would compete regionally with other schools in the surrounding districts. I was still teaching myself how to edit audio, and I'd often make her mixtapes that her team could create routines with. That shit was a pain in the ass, too. I didn't have a computer capable of doing any of the editing. I was literally teaching myself how to physically splice physical tape using audio cassettes. I became damn good at it. My family didn't own a cordless phone at the time. Instead, we had those wall-mounted touch-button phones with the 800-foot coiled phone cord. It would constantly get tangled up by itself, you know that one? This usually meant that I was in the kitchen, where the phone was mounted, when Kara and I were having one of our evening phone sessions. One night as Kara and I were discussing her upcoming drill team competition, my mom started calling out for me from the living room. I walked from the kitchen into the living room, still talking to Kara, when the local newscast came on. My mom told me to keep watching as she saw something very alarming on the news. It was the top story that evening. A young girl's body was just found just outside her high school that same morning. I remember being on the phone with Kara and watching the news as they covered it. It was December 14th, 1991. The name of the girl whose body was found was named Sarah Yarborough. She was on the drill team for her school. Apparently, she had gone to the school early that morning and planned to meet with the rest of her team to prepare for the local drill team competition. A competition that my girlfriend Kara and her team were scheduled to compete at. Her body was found partially clothed and was unfortunately sexually assaulted and strangled. Now, if the similarities weren't already kind of freaky, the moment they showed a photo of Sarah on the news, chills ran down my spine. Sarah had curly, fiery red hair. So did Kara. In fact, they even shared similar facial features. I immediately told Kara to turn on her TV to watch the news with me. We both thoroughly got creeped the fuck out. pretty scared right now. So I'll start out by saying I think there's a spirit or something talking to me. No, I'm not trying to sound crazy or anything, but at my house we have a shed in the woods where I work on my lawnmower. Just stuff. Has lights and everything. So anyways, tonight I went up there to just hang around. I had a flashlight with me. When I got in the shed, I went in and closed the door, still using the flashlight. Keep in mind, it was like 10:30 and the shed is pretty far in the woods. I went to turn on the light switch and it didn't come on. So I was just like, whatever, I'll go check and see what's wrong. But then my flashlight started flashing really fast and crazy. And a few seconds after doing that, it started flashing slowly, like staying on for 2 seconds, staying off for 2 seconds. So I was a little creeped out, so I walked outside the shed about 10 feet or so. It started working perfectly fine again. Weird, right? Now this is where it gets really interesting. After I got the power back on in the shed I was in, I was still a little creeped out by, but I went to walk back down to the house, turned around to the shed, and while pointing a flashlight at it, I said, "If anything's out there, make my flashlight flash 2 times. I waited a few seconds. Nothing happened. So I said, "Yeah, that's what I thought." Turned back toward the house and started walking, and I'm not kidding, the flashlight flashed 2 times, nice and slow. And so, yeah, I sped it up on the way back down. But I'm actually being serious, and the flashlight had never done anything like that before. Nothing since then. But even for a while, every time I'm at that shed and it's dark out, I always feel like something is watching me every time I turn my back. I just feel like something's in there. So do you guys think I should get one of those boards where you talk to ghosts or what? But I'm very interested, but I'm also a little worried. An entity is imitating my mom, and it hates me. Now I want to preface this story by stating that I'm a very analytical person. I'm a technical business analyst, for God's sake. So my livelihood is to analyze and find reasoning behind every situation. So it's to the point where I can't deny that something is living in my family home, and it imitates my mom. I live in Queensland, Australia. In about 2004, we moved into a very old Queenslander home. You can Google Queenslander home. You'll see the type of house I'm talking about. It was a big fixer-upper with very high ceilings and a beautiful deck that caught the summer breeze perfectly. It was the first house built in the entire street over 150 years ago. It used to be a celery farm. And I might know. About 15 years ago, my cousin was sleeping over one night. We were very close. She told me about all of her paranormal experiences. For context, she grew up in Indonesia, and her mother was apparently into black magic. So she's seen and experienced a lot of the paranormal. "There anything in my house?" I asked her. "Yep," she replied. "She sits on the windowsill of your mom's room." "Is it bad?" I asked, not too sure if I wanted to actually hear the news. "Just don't bother it," she said, shutting down the conversation. Fast forward a few years, I'm sitting on my bed studying with the door open. I then see my mom walk down the hallway with the washing basket, about to put on a load of laundry. About 5 seconds later, I see her walk down the hallway with the washing basket, going to the same direction she was before. I was baffled. How could she walk the same direction twice? Tried to shake it off, thinking it was just my tired mind playing tricks on me. After all, I was studying and it was late. About a year passes. I'd forgotten the spooky incident of my mom walking in the same direction twice. It was a Friday afternoon and I had my best friend over. We were hanging out in the kitchen talking to my mom. Mom was cooking dinner. Me and my friend were just chatting away. My brother then appears from his room. "Where's dinner?" he asked. "Still another 30 minutes away," Mom replies. Don't believe in ghosts, but I might soon. Don't really know where to start, but here goes. We recently moved house. Been looking for years, and this place was actually a fair price. Yet it needed some redecorating. The previous people smoked inside, but nothing major. So, a bargain, right? Well, it started by hearing footsteps upstairs. My hubby and I joked about it being haunted and put it down to the neighbors. Maybe it just sounds like it's above our heads, when in reality it's just next door in their house upstairs. So this goes on for months and becomes the norm. Well, next door went away a few days ago, but the footsteps continue. Summertime rolls around. Good few months ago. I'm the type of person who feels the heat. Usually I'll get the fans full blast. Well, not in this house. It's constantly cool. I even needed a jumper on this summer. Another odd thing is the smell of toast. At night, we randomly smell toast. This happens around once a week. After a while, I Googled it, and apparently it could mean that there's an electrical fault or dust in pipes. So we get the plumber and electrician round. Family friend. Everything checks out. We also smelled one up near the hallway at night. Also, while I was finishing cleaning, I found a small card for a hotel on my sofa. I'd literally just tidied. There's no way I would have missed it. So I take a photo, send it to my husband. He responded to me and said he'd take a look into it. Came back 5 minutes later and said it's a Spanish hotel that was demolished 10 years ago. So we're stumped on that one. A few weeks ago, hubby and I are watching TV in bed. Goes to the toilet, comes back to bed looking pale. I ask what's wrong. Lets out a deep breath and says, "Something ran at me." I asked what he meant. He said, "I came out of the toilet and in the corner of my eye, it looked like a figure ran at me. This place is fucking haunted." He doesn't believe in ghosts either, so hearing him say that sent chills down my spine. But we put it down to eyes playing tricks, illusions, light trickery. Anything but ghosts, basically. And last week, my children come screaming down the stairs with a look of pure terror on their faces. They're 8 and 6. My 8-year-old says someone was knocking on the door. "Where's Dad?" Dad was at the shops. And the door unlocked itself. I calmed them down and asked them to show me what they mean. So we all head upstairs. My 8-year-old demonstrates and shows me the lock. I suggested that maybe it wasn't locked properly, and maybe the knocking was a rat in the loft. I don't know what else to suggest at this point. I almost forgot about this one. A few months ago, I was sitting in bed and I heard creaking behind me on the top of the stairs. You know when someone's deliberately making a floorboard squeak by moving the pressure from one leg to the other? For about 40 seconds. It was constantly squeaking. My children like to play a spy game, so assumed it was one of them. I smiled and said, "I know you're there." The squeaking ceased, but I get no response. So I get up to go talk with them. They're not there, they're downstairs. We're still in contact with the people who used to live here. Sometimes we'll get each other's posts, so one of us will drop it off and the other. They're friendly enough, and often we'll have a small chat. Well, I jokingly said, "Don't suppose you had any strange happenings while you were there, like not being haunted or anything?" Started laughing. Her face dropped and she said, "No, of course not." Anyway, I got the pot on the stove, better make sure it's not boiling over, take care. And shut the door abruptly. More information. We have a dog who hates everyone apart from us. He's not bothered by the house. Thought animals were supposed to be more in tune with paranormal stuff. It's just weird at this point. Half my brain is screaming ghosts, the other half thinks there must be a logical explanation. I don't know anymore. Nightmare that's supposed to mean something. So it's currently 2:30 a.m. I was awoken by something bothering. To start off the dream, it was like 1 a.m. if I remember. I went down to get some water and fell asleep on the couch a few moments later. Woke up and there were no lights on at all. Tried opening up some lights. They weren't working, so I opened my flashlight. It was very dim for some reason, so I rushed upstairs into the room I was staying with and got sleep. A few minutes later, I was woken up with my heart racing. Decided to go down again to check if the lights opened, to check if they were just faulty. Still nope. Still faulty. Do note this is still the dream, and I woke up in a dream. So I decided to play with the lights upstairs, and some of them working, so I turned off the lights downstairs. Working or not, decided to go upstairs to investigate. Some lights were working and some weren't. My flashlight was still very dim, so I turned them off and my dad woke up, went down, went to the core, drink water. While I was waiting for him to come up, my mom suddenly went out of the room and was walking toward me. I hurried, walking into my room without looking back. While I was closing the door, she caught up and wouldn't let me get close to it. She was forcing herself, as if she wasn't my mom at all, or something pretending to be my mom. I noticed because my mom doesn't enter my room unless she really needs to. Then I found out she wasn't my mom. Directly told the woman she's not my mom. She went full psychotic. She barged into the door and transformed into this entity-like thing, who's somewhat after me and wants to hurt me. For some reason, I saw like comments of teenage girls, kind of like flashing before my eyes type, saying stuff like, "She's so me. Me and her are the same. So real. I hate men." Stuff like that. There was a name, but I forgot. When I woke up, my heart was racing. I got nothing on that one. House in the Woods. I will start by saying that this happened in summer of 2000. Kinda long story. My friends, JF and JD for short, and I grew up in our small town in Ohio. We frequented the woods behind our home and would play games like hide and seek or capture the flag very often with the neighborhood kids. Needless to say, we all knew the woods like the back of our hands. One day while bored, JF and I started to go hiking in the woods. We did this all the time back then, mind you. About 30 minutes into the hike, we stumbled upon an area with 8 perfectly lined up pine trees with a small white house hidden behind them. We had never seen these trees or house before in this area, so we were thoroughly confused. We could see no trails or driveways leading to the property, so we had no clue how this house could have been built out in the middle of the woods. The house, from all outward appearances, seemed to be in good condition for the most part, and it was mostly unassuming. We both started getting an uneasy feeling, decided to turn back and leave the area and head back home. Go to a couple weeks later. I'm over at my friend JD's house to play some PS2. At some point, we start talking about the woods, and he tells me about a little white house he came across in the woods. He goes into detail about the same rows of pine trees, and how he got a creepy feeling when he got close to the house and he split. I then told him how JF and I stumbled upon the same house a couple of weeks earlier and got the same feeling. Later that weekend, all 3 of us decided to go back to the woods, go explore this house. We spent a good 4 to 6 hours combing those woods. Couldn't find the house or the row of pine trees again. They weren't just missing. There was no trace that the house or trees were ever even there. To this day, all 3 of us get the heebie-jeebies when we all recall that summer and the mysterious house in the woods. Me and my family think there's something in our house. We live here over 5 years, but about a year we had some feelings that this place has something. First, my sister said she's hearing footsteps in the room. In the kitchen, we said maybe comes from somewhere else, and we didn't take it serious. Months pass, and my father started hearing it too. There would be nobody home when he would hear it. We didn't really care about it at first, but it got worse. At this point, even me heard it. I was asleep in the living room and woke up. Nobody was home, but I heard footsteps in the kitchen and room. I was so sure that someone is home, I started yelling, "Dad, is that you?" No answers, so I got worried. Went to the room, but there was no one there. My sister sometimes even come out of this room and ask if we did call her name, and says she heard somebody called her name clearly. This happened more than a few times. One time I was smoking and left the butt on my desk. Went to get some water, then came back, sit in my chair after a few minutes. I looked at my shirt, and the cigarette butt was on my shirt. Had no idea how it ended there. There was no way for it to just lay on my belly. All of this wasn't serious to me, but tonight I got scared shitless. I was trying to sleep in this room and was about to fall asleep. Started feeling a goddamn hand on the side, and then got scared immediately. I wasn't awake or asleep, but I feel something behind me was sleeping on my side. Tried to talk, but I got sleep paralysis, so stayed like this for a few seconds. When paralysis was gone, I just yelled my sister's name. Took me a few seconds to realize everyone was asleep, and was thinking what the fuck just happened. To be clear, I get sleep paralysis a lot, so it wasn't about this. I'm thinking I wasn't awake enough to process to feel a hand on me, and when did I get sleep paralysis right after that? And when I felt the hand, I immediately thought of these things my family was talking about. What should I do? Don't really have any idea about this. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about this. I feel like something is attached to me. In the past few years, I've experienced some odd things. In 2020, I was frantically searching for my deceased grandmother's rosary. I'm not religious, but it was incredibly special to her, therefore special to me. I looked everywhere, and nothing. Days later, it was sitting on my coffee table out in the open. Again, I'm not religious. I wasn't using it. Why did it appear in such an obvious place? Felt eerie. In 2021, I lost a bottle of very important prescription medication that I take. I searched up and down, under the bed, all around, for days and days. Showed up 5 days later, on, you guessed it, the coffee table. This time it felt mischievous, like the joke was on me somehow. This year I woke up and was definitely fully 100% awake. My husband wasn't in bed. I felt the weight of a human being sit down on the bed next to me. I was facing the opposite direction. I felt immediately like it was not my husband. I could hear him distinctly in the kitchen, but its presence was warm and loving. Additionally, every cat I've owned and have been attached to has seen things. Every time I've gone to, like a psychic of some sort, they always tell me they sense or see an older male presence with me. It's always an older male, which makes me think of my paternal grandpa. His last words were, "My dear sweet Natalie." My name, so I guess that made sense. He passed when I was 11, so I don't remember much about him. I don't know if it's him at all or anything. I've just been told this bullshit maybe. Anyway, these aren't the first instances or my experiences with the paranormal, just the most recent that I remember in detail. I often feel or sense things, like energy, but I'm not very educated in details. Are these all separate entities or just one? Is it a ghost, a spirit, or a spirit guide? Most importantly, is it good? My gut says yes, but should I be entertaining the idea of keeping it around? Photos and video disappearing, altered. So my wife and I were on a weekend holiday, staying at a nice hotel known for its Christmas decorations. We were watching the carolers. My wife was emotional as I was taking a video of the scene behind the carolers, swinging around to record the carolers from behind. When I stepped up to join my wife in the small crowd, a caroler was embracing my wife, whispered in her ear to calm her. My wife had taken some pictures prior to this. When we went to look at the pictures, every one she had taken was distorted. just a green screen or pixelated. It was the only one of the pictures that she took of them. Keep in mind that a caroler was embracing my wife as I went back to join her in a small crowd of 7 to 10 people. We immediately watched the video I'd taken to see if it was distorted like her photos. They weren't, but what we saw was even stranger. When I turned to record the carolers from behind, no one but my wife and the carolers were in the picture. The one lady was not embracing her. They were apparently singing just to her. We studied the video. There were no shadows of people, as if there were an illusion of the crowd standing in a way that were blocked by the singers. They simply weren't there. Again, the woman was embracing my wife when I joined her. I know I had to walk around some people to get to her, too. Possible sleep paralysis as a child. Hat Man. When I was a child, I refused to sleep by myself. When I did, I'd always end up screaming and crying for mommy or daddy. I remember very vividly on several occasions not remembering going to sleep, but waking up to my entire room being black and red. Yeah, like in the movie Insidious. I know how this sounds. But I would wake up and see what I can only describe as a Hat Man figure standing either in front of my window or in the corner of my room next to my closet. I had several encounters with this. I would run and climb into my parents' bed, tuck myself under the covers, and he would stand and stare at me in the hall. Sometimes I ran to my parents' room, would try to wake them up, but no one would wake up. Other times they would wake up and just tuck me in bed. I didn't talk about what scared me, though. I would just tell them that I'm scared. Until one night it got really creepy. I don't remember falling asleep. It's storming out. Everything is red and black. I'm terrified. I run to my parents' bed and cuddle up between them, and I shit you not, this Hat Man figure stood in the doorway whistling some weird tune. Couldn't wake either of my parents up to save my life, so I hid under the blanket. After I hide under the blanket, the whistling stops. I wait a second and peek my head back out. This figure was standing over my parents' king-size bed, looking down at me. Hat off, staring at me. I couldn't see any eyes, just pits of black, and I could make out weird grooves and bumps on his face and head. No hair. I don't know. Hat Man visited me a lot as a kid, and I had times where I would wake up on the floor of my bedroom after encountering him and losing consciousness. And that's the best way I can describe it. Everything after seeing him would just be gone, and I'd wake up on my bedroom floor instead of on the top bunk of my bunk bed. This happened up until 5th or 6th grade. Something's beating me up when I get into sleep paralysis. This started when I was in high school. The typical sleep paralysis to me starts with me feeling terrified. The feeling like something electric and ticklish at the lumbar part of my back. Then the tickling sensation spreads and boom, sleep paralysis. I also remember I died by suffocation by my thick blanket and I can't fucking move. Anyway, that experience pushed me into learning how to get in and out of sleep paralysis. I sleep on my stomach. Scary image, feel the scared feeling really electric on my back. And to get out, a friend told me to move my toe. Other thing that works for me too is placing my knuckles on my neck. Just little movements, and I can feel my real body again. So that goes on for, years. And all of that, I can't see anything, and there's always something beating me up like kicking and punching my back and neck and head. There's no pain, I can only feel the ticklish electric feeling, and I always try to shout and talk to those things, but never got a response. My ability to force sleep paralysis is lost after 18 or 19, but I still get sleep paralysis very, very rarely. When I sleep late and I sleep on my stomach. To this day, I'm still craving for that feeling. I still want to find a way to communicate to those things. friend I had over summer might have been imaginary. When I was 11, we moved to California near the Yosemite area. Lots of forest and small lakes where I lived. I moved right around when summer was ending and school was starting. So I took a bit to get settled and get used to everything. Summer rolled around the next year. My family's pushing me to get out of the house and do something besides staying inside and playing games all day. There was a lake with lots of dirt paths and such that was easy to explore, so I'd go around there a bit, just walk around. Especially this one spot that had a cool little waterfall into a smaller lake from the bigger lake at that area. Well, one of these days I'm walking to the lake, and I spot someone by the waterfall. She's a girl around my age, orange hair, freckles, and an accent I wasn't really able to understand at the time, which I think was a Tennessee accent. I've always been horrible with names, but I remember her name being a very common one, something like Alice or Casey or something like that. As a young kid, I never really had crushes on girls. Most of the time, if it was at friends or someone, them being a guy or girl didn't change much of how I interacted with them. And she was definitely the same way, because we immediately got along. I remember us going to the lake and just walking around a lot. I talked a lot about living in Washington, what school was like, and video games, something I could tell went right over her head. She said she was visiting her grandma over the summer at a house down the road from mine. I remember I had her number saved, so I'd text her whenever I was planning to go on a walk. She'd meet me at the end of the driveway of the house that she was at. I remember her saying her grandma didn't want her going to my place, which was understandable. I'm a stranger to this woman, and so would my family. But Alice didn't want me to come and visit the grandma either, which I remember feeling weird. I remember my friend Eric, who lived near the lake that would come by, wanted to come with me to walk around. Alice told me that she'd rather it just be the two of us. Maybe it was because she didn't know him, but she would only come with me on these walks alone. I remember one time we walked out a bit further than usual, one of these dirt paths I was telling you before. This one was a bit awkward because of a kind of a high incline on this hill. She'd have to pull me up for us to walk around and jump down when we walked back. Well, cut to near the end of summer, she's still hanging out with me, even meeting me on the end of my driveway. I remember one time I was having trouble finding my jeans, so I didn't get cut in the bushes. And we walked past and told my mom before she went to work to tell Alice that I was going to be a little bit late. I'll explain in a bit why this is important. On our last day walking around, we went to the rock that kind of overlooked the lake that we just kind of sat at. I remember she was talking about her family and how she much preferred being there in California than where she was from. Something I don't remember if she ever told me specifically or not. Well, I said bye to her and said I'd try to meet her at her house before she took off. I never did. I think I was forced to go to school or school shopping that day, so I sent her a text telling her. She didn't seem upset, though. I don't know if I just never checked in with her or if I'd forgotten her, but I never saved her contact. It was an old flip phone my parents had given me at the time when I was so young, and they didn't have good texting or calling plans at that time. Cut to a good while later, like 2021. A lot of dramas happening in my family, which I won't go into, but topics about my childhood and how I was treated or being brought up. I asked my mom about that year being forced to go outside more, and if that was her decision or my father's. Spoiler, it was my father's. I brought up how it wasn't bad, though, and that I had Alice to hang out with. That sparked a bit of nostalgic happiness I hadn't felt in a while, thanks to how bad that in the previous year was for us. Well, my mom would tell me something that I would continue to think back on over and over again. That imaginary girl you walk around the lake with? I immediately thought she was fucking with me, but she looked serious, and thought that the time I asked her to tell Alice I was going to take a while that I was talking about an imaginary friend, because she claimed she never saw anyone when she went down the driveway. I know I had interacted with this girl. I know I had gone with her to this lake many times, but I never ever thought about how I was the only person who ever saw her. Never my friend Eric or his brother, who sometimes went to the lake with me. Not my family, not even met her grandma. confirm if I'd even had this girl's number or if I'd even ever texted her. Threw me off a good bit, but then I remembered one thing that made me know I was right and she was real. One time in July when I was walking with Alice to the lake, my grandma had stopped to give me a soda while she was heading to the house to give Dad something. Well, when I had next talked to Grandma, I'd brought it up. Didn't know what I was talking about. Not until I brought up Alice. Oh yeah, I remember. Your dad always brought it up how you and some girl would walk around the lake, and I thought it was cute. Weird that he thought it was a real girl and not one of your imaginary friends. This shit still rocks me to the core. There's no fucking way that I imagined all this. I still have no idea what she could mean by one of your imaginary friends. If I ever found that old phone, if I even still have it in a box somewhere, I'm getting to the bottom of this. She has to be real. Otherwise, who the fuck else have I been imagining this whole time? Saw a spirit of a girl who died long before. What's some of your freakiest experiences? Around 12 years ago, I had a friend whose house was very old, and unfortunately full of items at the moment due to reasons. We would hang out there frequently. His mom would let us green out. What's that? And after this event, it turned out many of us had experienced paranormal encounters. One day, while I was helping move some stuff around the house, I'd walked through his kitchen and out the front door. Upon looking to the left while walking through the kitchen to the back porch, I'd noticed this apparition blacker than anything I've ever seen, in the shape of a little girl. It freaked me out so bad I had to sit outside for a bit, and I was going that way when I saw her. I also fainted in this kitchen sometime after, while not under the influence of anything, and I was healthy at the time as well. The fainting was due to the vibe of the room suddenly feeling extremely heavy. I hadn't felt sick or anything before or after this fainting. But anyway, I had waited about a week or two to mention it to him, and turns out, at the same point in the history of this house, a girl had died in a cellar directly above where I had seen her. For some reason it was a closed-off room, but it had a small hole coming from that room all the way to the main part of his basement, about 40 feet east, that was probably a 1x1 square pattern. He even showed me this hole and shining a light down it, surely enough. You could see all the way down toward where I saw the apparition. To this day, when I'm thinking about it, I can still vividly remember seeing it. Turns out the house has a long history to it. Even has one piece of giant Freemason's table in his attic that the house was built around. It even has those Indian windows in the attic as well. I've always wondered about seeing that girl and why I fainted in the kitchen not long after. It's as if a spirit was trying to possess or reach out to me in some way. It's how it felt before I fainted. I've never fainted before or after in my life, except once due to drugs. That was 10 years later. I always felt uneasy in that house. There was another instance where we were in a room on the second floor, laying on a bed. I could feel what felt like someone licking my forehead. Anyway, I've always loved paranormal stuff, and hope more happens to me in my lifetime. I just thought I'd share a crazy experience I had in the past. The first time I actually saw a full apparition. I've been sensitive as long as I can remember, so feeling spirit energy and possibly receiving information regarding them as pictures in my mind is something I'm familiar with, but I generally don't see them or interact with them. My sister and I decided to live together, and she bought a house built in the late 1930s. I've always liked old houses for various reasons. Well, from the first night I spent there, I felt very specific energy that seemed to attach to me. It felt female, and I got the impression she was not thrilled about either myself or both of us moving into her territory. Always watching over my shoulder with disapproval, other things occurred there as well, but this is mainly about her. It seems she's always watching me and grumpy about everything I did. Anyway, a few months living there, and I got sick with strep throat and was in bed sleeping when I suddenly woke up with the feeling of being watched particularly strong. I opened my eyes, and there standing in the doorway to my room was a lady I'd never seen before. She looked solid, like a living person. I can see every detail except shoes, because she didn't have any limbs past the hem of her blue house dress, so nothing from below the knee. Her expression was of stern disapproval, but no malice. She had salt and pepper brown hair to her shoulders and looked to be in her 40s or 50s. I blinked and she winked out of existence, leaving me staring, confused, at a now empty doorway. I knew immediately she was the one always looking over my shoulder, from the frown on her weathered face and the energy she gave off. I have never since actually physically seeing a spirit, and was shocked by how oddly normal and solid she was. I lived there only for a year and a half, and that was the only time I actually saw her. She messed around with things here and there, and her opinion of me never seemed to improve. Nothing about her was frightening or felt bad or like to think she was just checking in on my sick butt for whatever reason. So yeah, that's it. The house had a vortex, and many things came and went, and there were other weird things that happened there, but I'll never forget her. My sister still lives there, and she says activity settled down once I moved out, and only occasionally the odd thing will happen. Anyway, that's the one and only time a spirit showed itself to me, and I thought I'd share. The wooden cane was heard crossing the wooden porch. This story was told by my great-great-grandfather, who was there the night the strange event occurred. The story is passed down through the generations in my family, and allegedly is a true story. This was what I was told by my father. My great-great-grandfather, James, had a cousin who suffered from polio that left him crippled and weak. So much so that the young boy walked with a limp and a cane that he had to carry with him in order to get around. The boys continued to worsen with time, and the weakness and the paralysis of the polio virus began to affect his ability to breathe, and the young boy passed away at the age of 12 years from respiratory failure. A few years after the young boy had died, his younger sister developed pneumonia due to developing influenza. In the early 1900s, there were no modern antibiotics or treatments for the pneumonia or the flu, and sadly the young girl's condition worsened. My great-grandfather, along with other members of the family, were visiting the mother and father of this sick girl, and just around 8 p.m., the wind picked up around the old cabin, and the dogs outside began barking and howling a strange and mysterious bark that James said he had never heard a dog make before. It was then that everyone heard the sound of a cane going across the wooden porch of the cabin. The sound had no sooner started that it was silent, the dogs also silent. Then suddenly the sound started again, a steady thudding of a cane before the quiet whimpers. Then again, all silent. A short time later, it was found that the little girl had died. My great-grandfather, James, never believed in ghosts and thought it was a strange coincidence, but he said that night definitely made him wonder if the girl's older brother didn't come to take his sister to the other side. Dancing Ghost. Story not mine, but someone my mom knew. I think her uncle, her dad's friend. We'll just call him Dan. Dan used to work in a medium distance place. He used to come from a station. Whenever he would come, he would see this girl dancing at the end of the station. Nothing in front of her asking for money or anything. Just dancing. He didn't think much of it, as he'd seen some pretty weird shit in his life. For the first few weeks, he would just notice. But soon he realized that no one else seemed to look at her. But oh well, he thought. Well, this one day, there was a kid with his parents playing around with a ball. He threw the ball and it went across the station. And the barnland where the station end path ended, the mother saying something to the child, something as to not throw a ball towards Dan's direction, directing to the family, and he saw as the father went and got the ball. He watched as the father threw the girl twice, like right inside and outside, walked through her. Dan got horrified. He got up from his seat and went over to the tea stall and asked the man working there, "Hey, do you see that girl?" "Which girl, sir?" "The girl that's dancing." "Sir, there is no girl that is dancing on the station." The man asked Dan to sit down and gave him a cup of tea because he was freaking out. And then he explained that there was a girl that used to play music and dance here. She lived a few minutes away, but she wanted to become a dancer, but she was bullied by the boys that also lived nearby. And one day they made a video of her. And since it was a small area, she was getting more and more bullied as she was stared at everywhere she went. And one day, while sitting here in the station, she decided to give up on her life and jump in front of the train. Red Face Encounter. This happened to me and a group of friends a couple of years ago when I was about 19. I've done a ton of research, turned up with nothing similar. So one night, me and two friends that I haven't seen in a while recently got back into contact. I was bored, so I hit them up like, "Hey guys, I know it's been forever, but you all want to go out and go on a night hike?" They were down and said they'd be right over. Me, excited to go for the night woods walk, smoke some weed. Before you say, "Oh, you were just high," it's important to the story. And they picked me up and we head out. We go get some food on the way, and while there I offered if they wanted to smoke, which they declined because they don't smoke. So me, stoned, them, sober as a bug, we get on the back roads to go to a patch of woods with paths, and while we're driving, I see it. On the side of the road, laying on its side, like someone huddled over in the cold, had a bright red face, almost like crazy bad road rash or something. It had a sheen to it. It was also dressed in dark, raggedy robes, like the ones you see in fantasy monsters or witches. It scared the living shit out of me. But I was also so excited to go into the woods, I thought to myself, okay, that was scary as fuck, but you're probably just a little bit too baked and saw an old trash can. You're fine. Do not say anything to the girls because they'll definitely get a bad feeling and our night hike will end there. So I was silent about it and never mentioned it. Then we get to the parking lot of the woods. I'm looking at my phone and one of my friends in a scared tone says, "What the fuck is that?" I was overcome with fear instantly, like I had an instinct or something. And without looking up to mutter out, "What is it?" "The shit chills my bones to this day," she said. "I don't fucking know. It's like a homeless man with a bloodied face watching us from the pavilion." I'm crapping myself at this point. And the other friend says, "He's just watching us. It looks like his clothes are made of rags. I said, let's just get the hell out of here. Told him exactly that on the road earlier, but thought I was just crazy. I was so frazzled about the whole thing, I tried every way to rationalize it. We thought maybe it's a black trash can with a red dome lid, and the bag was over the edge. So I went back the next day, and there was absolutely nothing under the pavilion. No barbecue, no trash can, just a table. It took me a year to go back, and I still won't go after dark.